All right, so we're just going to make a quick video here to show you major and minor pivot points, point of control, what all that means. As you go through language of charting, a lot of these will uh, become clearer. Point of control is just where the most trading has occurred, and it's always going to depend upon the time frame that you're looking at, as will pivot points. So I could say a minor pivot point is here on the daily, but that could be a major pivot point on the 5 minute. I could say there's a minor pivot point, a major pivot point here on the 2 minute, but a real major pivot point may not come in until like on the daily chart. So you got to make sure you're understanding what time frames people are playing and what they're looking at. It has less to do with time frames and more to do with where people are. So, for example, if we were looking at this daily chart on Apple, like you can tell right here is a pretty big pivot point, right? That's your biggest area. Let's create these to make them a little brighter. So you can see this is your biggest area. That's your major pivot point, right? All right, well, this includes a lot of people from back here in July, August, September, October, and November. So what if we take those people out? Oh, wow, look, very different looking structure, right? It's got your largest ones are actually down here, which is what I love, okay? I want to have them below me, right? You want this slant like this for VP so that you can work your way up. Now, if we were to take away everybody, it's like, oh, shoot, really the major pivot points are here. See them right there and right there. That's your major pivot points. Now, if we were to break it down and we were to say, all right, well, let's look at certain zones. Well, if we're looking at just, the 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th, like from here forward, well, these are your major pivot points. And so a major pivot point is just the largest, thickest volume profile with what you're looking at. And if we were to go for, let's say, a 5-minute chart on Apple, what would you say is the major pivot point? Well, obviously, it's right here, right? And we're well above it. Now, if you look at the lines that I've drawn on Apple, these were drawn before these levels were made. So now that we're above them, what I would need to do is come in here and be like, all right, I need to know that if Apple pulls into these ranges, I'm going to be a buyer for sure, right? If Apple pulls into this range, I'll be a buyer. And now the point of control in this major pivot point is the longest bar. It's right there. You got your point of control, your value area high, your value area low, and your major pivot point here. Okay, well, what about this one up here? That looks like the pretty good pivot point as well. Well, that's true. So you see this thin line that I have right there? That's because there was a pivot point further back. So if we were to go further back and look at where these people are running against the people from back here, because that's where you're always looking, the closest people, you're going to see, do you see this humongous pivot point right here, right, that I'm on? That's a rather large pivot point, right? Well, what does that include? Well, if I were to take out the people from the backside, it's not as big, but it's still pretty big. What if I were to take out those people? Well, not a lot of people. So the people that are here, we need to be aware of them and be aware that this level is going to cause some resistance. But if we were to take everybody away from back behind them, it's like, all right, we see these people here, we see these people here. I would say this is a major pivot point. This is a minor pivot point. This is a minor pivot point. The thicker the VP, the larger the major pivot point. So if we go to a 3-minute chart and we look at just a 1-minute chart and we look at just the intraday action from a few days, it's like, all right, well, these may look like major pivot points, right? So it's like, wow, look at this one, but it's really only 1 or 2 days of volume. So if you're looking at a daily time frame, it's not going to really add up to a major pivot point. I want to make these a different color just because this way I'll know that they're the latest price action. So now as we play Apple and we're like, all right, let's buy a pullback or see if we can find a TTM squeeze that we can play to push it back up, we'll know that we've got a major pivot point here on a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute time frame. We've got another nice little major pivot point down here. And so when I think of pivot points, I think of most of the time the entire zone, value area high, value area low, and point control. However, I will say sometimes, hey, we're approaching a minor pivot point here. I'm taking a partial. And then I'll say, here's the major pivot point. This is your over under. And that's always going to be point of control. But to actually clear this whole thing, you need to get above this gap, which is the value area high. So point of control, thickest part, value area high, value area low. Pivot points can be major pivot point here, right? It could be this entire thing. And if we look at it on a 1 minute, it's like that doesn't, I mean, a daily, that doesn't look like a whole lot. It's not really a major pivot point. Understanding that that's where it is on the daily helps us understand, all right, we're just playing a daily time frame. So it's not that big of a deal if it doesn't break up or through or down. Where's the real thick area that if Apple does pull or break above, I'd like to pull it. And that's down here, right? That's right here on these. This is the real major pivot point. See that 214.55? This is where it all starts. That's your major pivot point. So that's it. Hope this clears it up.